Lantern Market. Tonight we are going to wander slowly through a calm night market where every stall is lit by handmade lanterns. You will stroll beneath strings of light, watching the small lives and quiet routines of the people who keep this glowing market alive long after the sun has gone down. At the end of a narrow street, the market begins with a simple wooden gate strung with paper lanterns. They hang in a loose arc, each one a different size, some round and plump, others long and cylindrical, all of them glowing with a soft, steady light. The paint on the gate is a little chipped, and there are tiny handwritten signs taped to one of the posts, advertising tea, steamed buns, and lantern repair. The air is warm but not hot, with a faint evening breeze that carries the mixed smells of grilled skewers, sweet dough, and incense from somewhere deeper inside. The stone under your feet is worn smooth in the middle from years of footsteps, and slightly rougher at the edges where fewer people walk. A thin line of rainwater from earlier in the evening runs down the middle of the street, catching the lantern reflections in broken little fragments. Somewhere a bell chimes the hour, and the sound hangs in the air before it fades into the low murmur of voices. You step under the wooden gate, and the lantern market opens up in front of you, like a small, glowing village, alive but unhurried. Overhead, a canopy of lanterns stretches from one side of the street to the other. Wires are strung like invisible branches, and from them hang dozens upon dozens of shapes, each with a slightly different color and brightness. Some lanterns are made from thin rice paper that glows almost white, with painted cherry blossoms and little birds. Others are a deeper red or orange, the color of ripe fruit, with black ink calligraphy brushed across them in steady strokes. There are a few with patterned fabric instead of paper, their light dimmer but richer, seeping through flowers and swirling lines. The breeze pushes gently at the lanterns, and they sway in small arcs, never bumping into each other, just moving enough to make the light shift on the ground. Shadows of the wires and frames make a faint crisscrossing pattern on the stones below. So each step passes through patches of brightness and shade. The humming of the market seems to rise up and mingle with the faint rustle of paper, creating a constant, soft background that feels almost like distant waves. As you walk slowly, you find your eyes following the paths of light, letting them guide you from stall to stall. The first stall to your left is a small wooden table covered with folded papers in careful stacks. Behind it sits an elderly woman with silver hair tied back in a low bun, her sleeves rolled up neatly to the elbow. She is folding a square of cream-colored paper, her fingers moving with practiced precision, creating sharp creases that turn flat sheets into lantern panels. Beside her, a man about the same age is brushing glue along thin bamboo strips, adding each strip to a round frame so that it begins to look like the skeleton of a lantern. A shallow metal bowl holds a little pool of warm glue, and a faint, slightly sweet smell rises from it. On the ground next to them is a crate filled with completed lanterns, each one simple and undecorated, waiting for paint or ink. Every so often, a customer comes by and chooses one, pointing at a size and a colour, and the old woman smiles and nods without breaking her rhythm. Sometimes a child leans in a little too close to watch, and the man lifts a finished frame for them to see, letting them tap it with one careful finger so they can feel how light it is. You watch one new lantern slowly emerge from their hands, from flat paper and loose bamboo to something hollow and ready to glow. And then you move on. A few steps farther, the smell of something cooking reaches you from a stall with a wide metal griddle. The surface is dotted with round moulds where batter has been poured, forming small golden cakes that puff up as they cook. The vendor, a middle-aged woman with a patterned apron, turns each one with a small metal stick, rotating them so they become perfect spheres. Steam rises in soft clouds every time she opens a nearby wooden steamer, and inside are pale buns stacked in tight circles. A large glass jar on the counter is filled with pickled vegetables. Thin strips of carrot and radish floating in clear vinegared water. Next to it, a simple kettle sits on a portable stove, and when the woman pours, the tea comes out in a thin stream, dark amber against the white porcelain cups. Customers stand nearby, some leaning against the stall, others sitting on narrow stools, holding their skewers and cakes and blowing on them before the first bite. Lanterns above the stall are slightly lower here, their light reflecting softly on the shiny metal surface of the griddle and turning the steam into glowing mist. If you pause, you can hear the faint sizzle of batter, the clink of cups, and the quiet, contented murmurs of people eating. Ahead, the main path of the market divides around a small stone fountain, no higher than your knee. Water spills from a carved fish into a shallow basin, and the surface is scattered with small coins, their edges dulled from years under water. Around the fountain, someone has strung short stands of lanterns that almost skim the water, their reflections mixing with the coins and ripples. A young boy stands on tiptoe, leaning over the edge, trying to toss a coin so that it lands on one of the darker stones at the bottom. His father stands behind him, with a gentle hand hovering near his back, just in case he leans too far. A couple sits on the low wall that circles the fountain, sharing a paper-wrapped portion of chestnuts. The shells crack softly between their fingers, and the warm, roasted smell drifts across the little square. On one side, a small sign on a wooden stand asks in careful handwriting for people not to touch the fountain lanterns, and the lantern cords are tied with extra knots to keep them safe. The overall effect is of a small island of shimmering light in the center of the walkway, a quiet pause in the flow of people passing by. To the right of the fountain, you find a stall that sells lanterns with wooden frames carved into delicate shapes. The stall owner is a man with careful hands and sawdust clinging to his sleeves. On the table in front of him lie thin pieces of wood, some already cut into swirling patterns, others still straight and plain. He works with a tiny handsaw and an even smaller file, smoothing each edge until it is soft to the touch. One lantern frame shows a pattern of waves and fish. Another has a ring of pine trees, and a third is filled with tiny stars cut right through the wood. Behind him, finished lanterns hang in a row, each one with the carved panels attached, and a layer of paper stretched behind them, so that when they are lit, the shapes fill with light. A small girl stands at the corner of the stall, her eyes level with the table, watching the saw move back and forth through the wood. She clutches a small coin purse in both hands, and every so often she glances up at one specific lantern, one with a rabbit leaping across a crescent moon. The craftsman notices and leaves the saw aside for a moment to hold that lantern lower so she can see it more closely, turning it around slowly so that each side has its own little scene. The soft scraping of the file and the gentle way he handles each frame give the stall a sense of quiet focus, even with the market moving around it. On the opposite side of the path, there is a cluster of glass lanterns that catch your eye immediately. Instead of paper, these lanterns are made from panels of colored glass, set into metal frames. Their surfaces slick and cool looking under the lantern light. Some of the glass is clear, with faint bubbles trapped inside, while other pieces are deep blue, emerald green, or a warm amber tone. The vendor, a woman with round glasses perched low on her nose, is wiping each panel with a soft cloth, removing fingerprints so that the colors can show clearly. When a breeze passes through the market, the glass lanterns clink lightly against each other, a delicate sound like small bells. A single bright bulb inside each frame spreads light unevenly through the glass, creating patches of color on the stones below. So the ground here looks as if it has been painted. A young couple stands side by side, testing how the colors look on their hands and sleeves, holding them under the blue lantern light and then under the green. One particularly large lantern near the edge of the stall has glass pieces arranged like scales on a fish, overlapping slightly, and when it swings, the reflections move across the nearby wall in a shimmering pattern. The mixture of soft light and tiny metallic sounds gives this small corner of the market its own gentle rhythm. A little further along, the sound of a stringed instrument floats softly over the murmur of the crowd. Turning a corner, you arrive at a slightly wider space where the market opens into a small square. In the center sits a musician on a low stool, a wooden case open beside them, with a scattering of coins inside. They are playing a lute-like instrument, plucking the strings with steady fingers, and the music moves in slow, looping phrases. Around the square, the stalls pull back slightly, leaving room for a circle of simple wooden benches and a few mats laid directly on the ground. Some people sit and listen, with their eyes half closed, hands resting loosely on their knees. Others stand at the back, holding bags and food, pausing just for a song or two before moving on. Lanterns here hang lower, closer to the people sitting, and the musician's instrument gleams softly under the nearest one, the polished wood reflecting a faint golden sheen. The notes are not loud. They simply fill the space, weaving gently between the benches, rising a little each time the vendor at a nearby tea stall sets down a cup or refills a pot. This corner of the market feels like a room without walls, held together by music and light. Next to the square, tucked just slightly to the side, is a stall where a calligrapher writes wishes on small slips of paper for lanterns. A long strip of cloth hangs at the back, covered in examples of characters brushed in dark ink, each one clear and precise. The calligrapher, a calm-looking person with their hair tied back neatly, sits behind a low table with brushes laid out in a straight line. Bowls of ink rest on a folded cloth, and the surface of the ink is so still that the lantern light above it makes a soft oval reflection. Customers step up one by one, leaning in to quietly say a word or phrase they want written. The calligrapher nods, sometimes asking a short question to make sure they understand, then picks up a slip of thin paper and a brush. Each stroke goes down with no hesitation, the characters forming in a few smooth movements. When the ink is dry enough, the slip is handed over, and the person ties it to the frame of a lantern they have chosen, sometimes reading the characters again under their breath. A line of lanterns above the stall is already full of fluttering wishes, the small papers shifting in the breeze like pale leaves. Watching the repeated motions of dipping, brushing and tying feels steady and predictable, like a slow breath. As you continue down a side lane, branching off from the main path, the crowd thins, and the lanterns are spaced a little farther apart. Here the market is quieter, with more gaps between stalls, and more shadows resting against the walls. A cat with striped fur moves lazily along the edge of the street, pausing to sniff at a crate, and then stretching under a chair. Some of the nearby shop fronts are closed, their windows dark behind wooden shutters, that lantern cords still run past them, so patches of light land on the shutters in bright rectangles. A single open stall in this stretch sells only candles, arranged in neat rows by height and colour. The vendor, an older man in a flat cap, trims the wicks with tiny scissors, dropping the cut ends into a metal tin. The wax surfaces look smooth and slightly glossy, reflecting a faint version of the lanterns overhead. Further down, there is a small bench set against a wall, its paint worn away in places where many people have sat. Someone has left a folded umbrella leaning against it, the fabric still damp from the earlier rain. This quiet lane feels like the back hallway of the market, where the glow reaches but does not crowd. You make your way back toward the main line of stalls, following the sound of laughter and the brighter, thicker net of light ahead. There is a stall where a young man is repairing broken lanterns, his tools spread out in a careful semicircle on the table. He has a small box of spare bamboo rings, a spool of thin wire, and a stack of papers in subtle shades of cream and pale yellow. Someone brings him a lantern with a torn side, the painted pattern interrupted by a jagged rip. He examines it, turns it gently in his hands, and begins to peel away the damaged panel. Underneath, the frame looks delicate but still strong. He cuts a new piece of paper, tests its size against the gap, and brushes glue along the edges. When he smooths the paper into place, he presses it with the side of his hand, moving from the center outwards to push away any bubbles. The painted pattern will not match exactly, but the lantern will glow evenly again, and that seems to be enough for its owner, who thanks him and steps back into the flow of the market. On a hook near the front of the stall hangs a lantern patched many times, with different shades of paper, kept there as a sample of what can be repaired. It glows a little unevenly, but interestingly, like a small patchwork of light. Not far away, a stall is dedicated to fabrics and tassels used to decorate lanterns. On a wooden rack, strips of cloth hang in a row, each one dyed a different color, and sometimes patterned with small geometric shapes or flowers. The fabric is lightweight and moves easily when someone brushes past or when the air stirs. On the table, shallow trays hold bundles of tassels, some plain and some braided, with tiny beads threaded at the top. A woman with a tape measure around her neck helps a customer match a lantern to a piece of fabric, holding them side by side under a lantern so they can see how the colors combine. Nearby, a teenager carefully wraps a narrow band of patterned fabric around the top of a lantern, tying it in a neat knot that turns into a decorative bow. The edges of the fabrics catch the lantern light, showing their texture, some a little rough like linen, others smooth like silk. A mirror propped against a post allows people to see how a lantern looks when they hold it up, and the reflections multiply the shapes and tassels into a busy, colourful cluster. The quiet rustle of cloth and the small clicks of beads touching each other add a gentle, repetitive sound to this area. In another section, the lanterns are smaller and designed to be carried by hand. A stall here sells wooden handles with hooks at the end, along with compact lanterns that can be folded down for storage. The vendor demonstrates by sliding a lantern open along its frame, the paper expanding into a full shape with a soft whispering sound. A row of children stands in front of the stall, each one holding a lantern they have chosen, some round, some shaped like animals, some painted with simple stripes. An older woman kneels to show a child how to attach the lantern to the handle, making sure the hook is secure and the base is balanced. The lanterns here glow a little brighter, as if ready to be lifted and taken into motion. Every so often, one of the children gives their handle an experimental swing, and the lantern describes a small circle of light in the air before an adult gently steadies their arm. The sight of many small lanterns clustered at child height makes this part of the market look like a field of tiny moving stars that are almost ready to drift away into the surrounding streets.